Welcome to today's webinar, Blueprint for Greening Affordable Housing, hosted by the Maryland Department of Planning in association with the Smart Growth Network. My name is Michael Bayer. I'm the Manager of Infrastructure and Development at the Maryland Department of Planning and Project Manager for the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse. The Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse is a project of the Smart Growth Network supported by the U.S. EPA's Office of Community Revitalization and managed by the Maryland Department of Planning. In addition to hosting webinars, the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse has a website, smartgrowth.org, that provides current information on effective growth, development, and preservation practices. The website provides news and information about events, funding opportunities, awards, and resources to help local decision makers foster healthy, resilient, and economically vibrant communities. The Clearinghouse is the virtual home of the Smart Growth Network, a nationally recognized coalition of leadership organizations that have formally endorsed the principles of smart growth. This webinar is one in a series of webinars produced by the Maryland Department of Planning on smart growth and planning topics available for viewing at smartgrowth.org. We are recording this webinar and will be posting it on our website under the Webinar Archives tab. We encourage you to visit the website and to subscribe to our e-newsletter for smart growth and planning news and to learn about our upcoming webinars. You can also find out about planning initiatives, planning tools, and educational opportunities in Maryland by visiting the Maryland Department of Planning's website at planning.maryland.gov. The views expressed by the speakers in this webinar are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the Maryland Department of Planning or the state of Maryland. Viewers of this live event are eligible to receive 1.5 CM credits from the American Planning Association and 1.5 CNUA CEU self-reported credits from the Congress for the New Urbanism. To log your AICP credits, visit the American Planning Association's website at planning.org, log into your account, and search for the name of today's event, which is Blueprint for Greening Affordable Housing. You can also search for event number 920-9137. And I realize that may not be on the screen right now, so I'll repeat that for everybody. It's 920-9137. I would also like to acknowledge our partner today, Island Press, and their partnerships manager, Jen Hawes. Founded in 1984, Island Press's mission is to provide the best ideas and information to those seeking to understand and protect the environment and to create solutions to its complex problems. So to get started today, our speakers are Walker Wells and Kimberly Vermeer. Walker Wells is a principal with Vermeer and Associates, where he works with cities, neighborhoods, and community development organizations to further green building and sustainable development practices through technical guidance, stakeholder facilitation, and the development of innovative policies and programs. During the past 2 decades, Walker has helped to shape green affordable housing policy. He's educated hundreds of practitioners, and he has overseen the certifications of more than 2,000 units of green affordable housing. Prior to joining Vermeer and Associates, Walker was the executive director at the nonprofit Global Green and oversaw the organization's green urbanism projects. He is a certified urban planner, a LEED accredited professional, and a green rater, and a lecturer in green urbanism at the Claremont Colleges and the UCLA Urban Planning Program. He holds bachelor's degrees in sociology and environmental studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a master's of city and regional planning from the California Polytechnic University, San Luis Obispo. Kimberly Vermeer is a multidisciplinary green building and sustainability practitioner with a special focus on the multifamily affordable housing sector. Through her company, Urban Habitat Initiatives Incorporated, she offers strategic consulting to community development corporations and other affordable housing developers to advance sustainability and climate resilience. Committed to delivering the benefits of green building to vulnerable populations, Kim works with teams to incorporate energy efficiency and renewable energy, water conservation, healthy housing, and climate resilience into their projects. She directs project certification through LEED or Enterprise Green Communities rating systems, as well as the LEED for Neighborhood Development rating system for larger master plan projects. She received her bachelor's degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a master's in city and regional planning from the Harvard Kennedy School. Following their presentation, Walker and Kim will answer as many questions as time permits. You can submit a question anytime by using the questions tool in the control panel located on the right side of your screen. And now, given our kind of technical difficulties, I'm going to turn the floor over to both of them and they are going to present and show themselves. Welcome to Walker and Kim, and hopefully you'll be able to pull up your PowerPoint, Kim, and then you can go ahead.
Sure. I'll say hi, everyone. So glad to be here today. Glad that you are here with us. We're very excited to be sharing our book, Blueprint for Green and Affordable Housing, and talking about how green affordable housing is foundational to what Michael said in the introduction of smart growth, seeking to provide healthy, vibrant, and sustainable communities. And Walker, while I get our presentation up, say hello, please.
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Thanks for making the time for participating in this presentation. We're very excited about our book and excited to have a chance to share some about the book and some of our findings and some trends that we see out on the horizon related to green building and affordable housing.
So we're going to take ourselves off video while we do the presentation, and we'll come back on for Q&A. So here we go.
Yes, you should run it in presentation mode as well. We can see your screen.
I thought I had done that. All right.
You're good.
It's now corrected? Okay, it just takes a few minutes. Well, our book, Blueprint for Green and Affordable Housing, was published this past summer. Island Press is our publisher. We're very happy to be working with them. And if you buy it today, you get an extra special discount of 30% through the Island Press website. It is, of course, also available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you can buy it at your local bookshops as well. It's available in a lot of places. We hope you're able to buy it and enjoy it. And our agenda today, we're just going to start a little bit about the stakes that planners are thinking about and how it reflects in green and affordable housing. And then we're going to talk through the book. In the blueprint, we're going to cover the development process, look at costs, look at green operations and emerging trends, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as we get through it. So the topics, we wrote the book and we're committed to green and affordable housing, but recognize that the push for green and affordable housing is coming in a context that we've just been slammed into here in 2020, where health and housing, health and low-income populations, health and essential workers are all top of mind. And we have been really pressed to think and rethink questions of social equity, racial equity. And as we've had more and more climate disruptions, we understand that the push to decarbonize is becoming the way we are really starting to think about green building. And green affordable housing is right in the center of all of these key topics that are all on our minds and all things that we're confronting today.
And so what COVID has certainly brought to bear are some of these historic inequities. And this is trying to align sort of our book that, you know, sounds like it's very focused on buildings and green building, but certainly touches on a number of the issues that urban planners are concerned about, which are patterns of land use, how public investment is distributed, and how those patterns build up a systemic condition that manifests itself going forward into the present and the future. So I think as an outcome of COVID, it's reinforced some of the legacy of previous decisions. This is a mapping of Chicago and Cook County, and what you see in the colors are the redlining maps, the Home Owners Loan Corporation maps. From the 30s, and then that's overlaid with instances of COVID-related deaths. And you can see, and people have done this in other places, that some of the disinvestment or lack of investment in various parts of the city continues to be reflected in issues that we're seeing today, largely because of quality issues with housing, overcrowding, and then sort of income, of course, and people's ability to work from home and or lack thereof. So what this speaks to is, I think seeing green affordable housing is one way to sort of make public investments that really have this aspiration of touching on equity, economy, and environment concurrently. Next slide. There we go, little lag. And just a little further evidence about this other topic related to urban heat and climate change. So Kim mentioned these three issues about sort of COVID climate and social equity. And so just in this instance, you know, not surprisingly, some of the areas with the lowest tree canopy cover, the highest degree of impermeable surfaces, most vulnerable to heat, are also some of the areas that were also sort of subject to redlining and experienced sort of lack of investment. So these are issues that we need to be aware of in the larger context as we're focusing on housing. Next. So, you know, smart growth is really, you know, this multifaceted effort to build in the right place and then sort of the right buildings in the right place. Of course, stemming sprawl, promoting urban infill, and, you know, affordable housing is certainly a part of this. And it is one of our primary tools for equitable development. Both Kim and I have been involved in some of the equity discussions at U.S. Green Building Council, and can have these sort of broad-ranging conversations, but when it comes down to what can we do, a lot of the attention gets focused on housing and schools as these public assets that, you know, where green building could play a role, and where we can, by virtue of doing green building, sort of elevate the value of those properties and address some of these historic inequities. So just quickly, you know, I think affordable housing has been part of the smart growth palette, you know, since the offset, you know, understanding that people having to live far away due to housing costs and, you know, travel to work is negative from a vehicle miles travel perspective and quality of life perspective. This is why we're, you know, housing, as you can see in this image here, you know, housing next to transit, next to jobs, next to services, sort of get you this sort of stacking of benefits. In many instances, the investment in affordable housing or low-income housing is the first new investment in neighborhoods for years, and really operate, you know, can be, if done correctly, you know, be a catalyst for revitalization. Of course, keeping in mind concerns about gentrification. And if we go to the next slide, just to give a bit of a background on sort of where our book is focused, is on sort of the affordable housing with a capital A. And, you know, the book is focused on opportunities for sort of subsidized housing, income restricted housing, to integrate a range of green features to augment the value of that public investment, create healthier places for the residents, make more out of these public investments. And so, and these investments are not small or insignificant. About 20% of our housing starts annually are affordable housing, income restricted. One of the tools, financial tools, that's kind of a platform for much of this housing is the low-income housing tax credit, leveraging about $9 billion a year. And over time, we've seen this really driving document or set of regulations, the qualified allocation plans, acknowledge the value of green building and sort of bake it into the criteria that are used to allocate these funds. So it's a significant part of the built environment, and there's some policy instruments that support green. This is a snapshot out of a report from Global Green from 2017, the last time we did this analysis there. That just shows you that while, you know, there's variation across the states in terms of the extent of green building practices or requirements, what we saw over time, we did this for about 10 or 11 years, was that it shifted from there being a few high performing states and most everybody not doing much at all to a condition where every state had something that could be considered green in its QAP, and really seeing this adoption of green as a best practice and really almost like a sort of a form of insurance that the public investment would be put to good use and we were getting good buildings out of these public dollars. Next slide. And lastly, there's a lot of discussion about housing typologies, the missing middle, missing middle housing could certainly work for affordable housing and green affordable housing. But what we're showing here on this slide is that green affordable housing can come in so many sizes, shapes, forms, typologies, and for whatever is being built, whether it's single family ownership through Habitat for Humanity or a high-rise tower with Jonathan Rowe's companies in East Harlem and everything in between. A lot of the approach and the practices stay consistent throughout, and it's really to adjust the application to the condition. So I think we've found ways that green applies to many different types, and the book has a series of case studies that touch on these projects that you're seeing here to make that case and then show how green can be adjusted to the specific project conditions. And that's on to the next slide. So back to Kim.
Yeah. So with that as an introduction, part of why we wrote the book, a big reason, is that we wanted to make sure that green affordable housing continues to be a priority and that the people and the organizations building it have a place where they have the key concepts and the key tools that they need to be successful at it. And we're really looking for affordable housing to play that role in delivering better equity, both in the housing arena and in the sustainability arena. And I had used the first edition of the book, which Walker had been the lead author of, in professional education. And I knew that the case studies were an important element of peer-to-peer exchange and peer learning about how to make this happen. So I was very excited to find a whole new set of cases and to talk with the organizations and learn about those projects and be able to share a whole new set of cases in the book. And our target audience, certainly not our only audience, but our target audience is the project manager. Project managers already have to deal in putting a project together, the health and well-being of the residents who are going to be living there, the connections of their building to the neighborhood and community that it's located in. They have to manage a design process. They have to get the funding. They have to get the thing built, and then they have to turn it over to their operations team. And within all of those things that they have to do, there are green and sustainable elements that have to be considered, so that in terms of, for example, community connections, we're looking at how walkable the location is. Are we creating a climate resilient building? Are we connecting to local services and local businesses? When we're doing construction, how do we manage the process to make sure that our green goals and this, if it's being certified, how the certification process is going to work? And so with the book, recognizing that there's so many things that a project manager has to juggle, we wanted to give them the information they need to be able to successfully navigate both circles in the diagram. We were honored that Jonathan Rowe offered the foreword for our book, and he talked a lot in his section about the way that affordable housing helps to offset the equity considerations, and that green affordable housing helps to deal with environmental injustice and environmental equity, and that it's a way of offering restorative justice in both economic and environmental dimensions. And that he wants us all to be striving to do more and better, and together building that kind of a new vision for a new world. So what's in the book is a first chapter of why green affordable housing, and that is just really making the connection and between sustainability, housing, affordability, environment. And then we walk through the development process in a full chapter on the integrative design process, a long chapter with all of the basics of water, energy, stormwater, resource efficient materials, ventilation, and indoor air quality, and also a chapter on costs and financing and how to navigate the tricky issues around that. We have a chapter on green operations and a chapter on emerging trends, and then we have 14 case studies. So in the next little while, Walker and I are going to take turns walking through each of these sections in turn. So making the case. We know that sustainable development is a pretty standard definition, is that we want to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And especially nice talking to a smart growth-oriented crowd, we really ground thinking about green affordable housing in the 3E equation that the smart growth movement really brought to the forefront. That we are looking for ways to have mutually beneficial solutions that are balancing environment, economy, and equity. And the way we see how this comes to play in green affordable housing, we have summarized in this table. So in terms of the standard formulation for equity, well, affordable housing is offering safe and decent homes. Usually some degree of social services programs, resident supports are part of what's happening in that housing. And it's providing mixed income communities, either in the project itself or by making sure that affordable units are part of the mix of units available within a community. But then green expands the equity formula for housing by also focusing on health and healthier indoor environments, thinking about how the project is connected in ways that can encourage walking and biking and easy local connections, and protecting the health of both the residents, but also construction and manufacturing workers by choosing less toxic materials to build with. And you can see in the other columns as well, same kind of formulation for economy. Yes, for families, having stable housing costs and having housing near jobs, education, and services is critical to their household security and ability to have financial stability. But if we go to green building, we can further reduce those costs for residents and for the owners of buildings, and really focus on providing a durable and resilient asset that can continue through time. So you can see how together, whether it's equity, economy, or environment, while there's fundamentals that the housing can provide, if we do it in a green way, we have additional benefits.
So the question is, how do we do all of these things and produce these buildings that really take the foundation of affordable housing and its benefits that Kim described and sort of layer on the different attributes of green building. And as Kim described, sort of see green building not as a diversion, but really as a way of sort of plussing up what affordable housing already sort of intends to do. And as Kim and I talked through the project, we said, well, where do we start? We need to make the case to show how housing fits into this larger context of equity and justice and human rights, climate action, UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that was chapter one. And then this next chapter we arrived at really saying that it is the integrated design process. The fundamentals, haven't changed that much in the last 10 years. What has changed is we've gotten better at doing it. So not just talking about integrated design, we've sort of said, well, we have tools, we have checklists, we have charrettes, and we have an understanding, that while a building is a system or a system of systems, and we're trying to intervene in that system, the way to do it is through changes in the process. And so to not have things sort of as linear or as siloed or sort of specialized, but to create moments where the different design professions can have interaction and synergy, but also the needs of the community can be brought into the room, as well as really, I think, a much more evolved understanding of the sort of financial tools that can be brought to bear and how to get the green measures into the financing, or sort of greening the pro forma concurrent with, greening the drawings. Next slide. Key to all of this is starting early, and starting at that point of planning and entitlements, which again speaks to the sort of smart growth ethos of pick an urban infill site next to transit and services. If it's a brownfield and you can clean it up, that's even better. If you're able to orient your buildings correctly on the site, so you have good daylight access and solar access, that's even better again. But we try and think early on, again, about all of these options and trying to sort of get things right from the beginning and not preclude opportunities from being captured throughout the whole process. And the main point of this slide is just that early on, opportunity is high, cost is low. The cost is the cost of a conversation or a little bit of research. And there's time to explore, again, solar, net zero, gray water systems, a building with no parking. I could keep going through this list of features, but as we move through the process and we get through design development, or into construction drawings, it does become more costly to kind of force in the green measures, and we're having to pay to undo things and then to have to do something differently. And the argument here is that opportunity drops because the cost of doing so just gets so high. So this is why, again, we focus so much on the project managers, because they're the person that's there throughout this whole sequence that you see on this particular slide. And in the book, we go through each one of these steps, 1 through 10. I may have something in front of it. Yeah, 10's the last one, and onto operations and maintenance, which Kim will speak to. But really saying, let's pick a good site. Let's get it to be as dense as we can with as little parking as possible in most places. Let's think about massing and form and schematic design. Use the charrette really as a moment of exploration and synthesis by the design team. Follow the charrette with some steps on research, cost analysis, identifying specific strategies, get those strategies specified in the construction documents, and then in construction, do the field verifications and follow through with certification. Again, all of this is described in this chapter of the book, and really stretching the design process, from planning all the way to position for operations and maintenance. Next slide.
So you've got a process outlined, but then what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to have in your building? How's it all going to come together? And that's what chapter 3 is about. And in the chapter, we cover all of these fundamentals for green planning and design. We first look at location decisions and site design. Then we go through water, including stormwater management, as well as water conservation indoors and out, and energy and renewables, resource efficiency as far as materials and construction methods are concerned, and indoor environmental quality. We've got a few slides to illustrate all of these in this next section. So with location, the sun and the wind still matter. In some respects, people say that, from the 1950s till the 1990s, we sort of forgot about the sun and the wind. We decided that mechanical HVAC systems could solve our comfort issues for buildings, and so we just could ignore the sun and the wind. But we know as a fundamental for green building that the sun, the location, the orientation, opportunities for passive solar, protecting buildings from solar gain during the summer are all really critical to reducing the amount of energy that we need to keep buildings and residents and occupants comfortable. And wind direction helps us think about where doors should go, what direction awning windows should open, and all those kind of things. And then site design, thinking about the massing and the location, some of the urban design considerations, trying to figure out how to reconcile sun and wind and urban scale or other site considerations, really key and really important to address early in the process. Of course, stormwater management is an issue everywhere. The picture on the left is from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and is an effort that the city is doing to plant out rain filtration gardens between sidewalks and streets to really try to reduce the amount of stormwater coming straight off building sites and sidewalks and going to the road, trying to stop some of it, filter it, clean it up before it gets into the stormwater system. And on the right, we see a green roof at a mid-rise multifamily affordable housing project in East Boston, where the roofs help to capture and slow down stormwater so that there's a better chance to process it and reduce the amount going into the storm sewers. And of course, water conservation is really critical as well. This is a pie chart of the way we typically use waters in homes. And one of the simplest ways to reduce water conservation is to look for water sense qualified fixtures when we are designing homes. We have more and more, we hear the push to decarbonize, to become carbon neutral. There's a big push to convert to electricity as a way of accomplishing that. And when we do that, then we are looking for ways to bring clean energy sources into projects. So I like to say the most important energy in a building is the energy it's never going to need. And so that's the energy it doesn't need because you built a good envelope for the building. It's well insulated and well air sealed, and you've put very efficient appliances and lighting in so that it doesn't need as much energy. But then what you do need for comfort and for livability, you want to supply from renewable sources like photovoltaic and like solar thermal. Resource efficient materials are important too. One of the biggest environmental impacts that buildings have is the extraction and then manufacture of materials. So we're really looking for materials that are responsibly sourced, such as wood that comes from the Forest Stewardship Council, materials that have high recycled content, and materials that are durable. We also want to build in a way that keeps buildings durable. So this is a section of a wall section showing how the moisture and the rain from the outside is able to travel and not get into the wall. So that this is a much more durable envelope that can last many years longer before it needs replacement or repair. And that's another way to be thoughtful and resourceful about how we use materials. And of course, this year with COVID, our understanding of indoor environmental quality and ventilation and health, we have a whole new understanding of that. So green buildings have always called for good quality ventilation systems. And often the standards are for what's called compartmentalization of units in a multifamily building. And that's meaning that each unit stands alone from an airflow point of view, so that fresh air is provided to the unit, it's filtered on its way in, it's conditioned, and then it's exhausted, and it doesn't interact with the air from the corridor or from the unit next door, so that with filtering and quality fresh air, the unit can have a really healthy environment. Of course, smoking is a big trigger for asthma and other respiratory illnesses, and so implementing no smoking policies is an important contributor to improved indoor environmental qualities. And comfort is really critical. If we don't create buildings where residents are not going to be comfortable, no matter how fancy our systems are and what we think we've tried to do, residents will undo our work in order to be comfortable. So indoor environmental quality also demands that we are really thoughtful about the sizing of our heating and cooling systems to make sure that they're providing heat and cooling properly, and that residents have controls so that they can manage the temperature and conditions that are right for them. To do that, so with our cases, what we're able to do is to have some examples. So for each of the case studies, we have a little summary where we go through these different categories and explain what that particular project did in order to be green. And so, for example, this is senior housing at a transit stop on the MARTA in Atlanta. And they are part of a larger mixed use, mixed income development that's there. And there's our services and amenities right where the building is located, and then many more just 1 or 2 transit stops away. And so that's some of the location features. And then just for water efficiency, they used WaterSense fixtures. They went with flapperless toilets and very low flow lavatory faucets and shower heads. So just some examples of kind of things. And another project, the Century Villages at Cabrillo, and Walker can talk a little bit more about this, but this is a master planned project with a number of green buildings in it. Another one of our case studies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is one of the 2 lead for neighborhood development projects that are featured in the book. And the second is the first phase of Rebuild Potrero in San Francisco. This particular project, Century Villages at Cabrillo, it's in Long Beach, California, on land that used to belong to the Navy, that was sort of transferred to the city and then eventually transferred to this nonprofit organization, Century Villages at Cabrillo, largely to provide housing and services for homeless, a number of whom are veterans. So there's a legacy back to the Navy. They inherited a bunch of quite dilapidated buildings, and over the years have sort of torn those down and built some new ones. The one that you're looking here, Anchor Place, is the second new building of this magnitude that they have constructed in the last 5 years. So 2 LEED certified buildings, 1 platinum, 1 gold. And then as these 2 buildings were getting finished up, the question is sort of what happens next. And the folks at Century Villages said, well, we have plans to do this over here and maybe take down some of this sort of shared housing and replace it. And I started asking about their master plan and its status, and they said it was due to be updated. And fortunately, this was right at the time when the U.S. Green Building Council had grants, their Affordable Green Neighborhoods grants, which were there to support the use of LEED for neighborhood development in affordable housing or public housing developments. And they applied, they were awarded the grant. And so we were able to really use LEED for neighborhood development as a design tool as they built out this master plan for their overall campus. And there's a lot of interesting things in the buildings, and then some sort of shared resources like a large grassy area that's a place for convening, but also the large stormwater retention basin is underneath that. So the next question is really, how do we pay for all this? These are great ideas. Where does the funding come from? So you can see over there on our wheel, sort of thinking a lot about cost and benefits, really trying to find ways to capitalize the savings that are coming from the measures that Kim talked about, particularly on energy and water. And then, of course, folding in rebates, incentives, and even some of the more sort of innovative financing strategies that are out there, looking at utility rates, looking at power purchase agreements. But this, this excerpt from the blueprint speaks to really thinking about who's paying, making the investment, and who's reaping the benefits, understanding there can be this split incentive problem that the person that pays doesn't benefit, but also acknowledging that in affordable housing, there's some unique ways to actually bridge between those 2 sort of capital cost, operation cost items. Furthermore, just in thinking about cost, getting into this, it really requires understanding a little bit of the financing for these developments. So, the low-income housing tax credit requires that the projects stay, income restricted, affordable for at least 15 years. So we have a longer time horizon than there is in private sector development. We're not in a, 2 to maybe 5 year process. So, we have a longer window to think about payback, which means we can move away from just thinking about first cost, start to look at payback, start to look at life cycle costs, start to look at return on investment. And then as we'll see in the next few slides, to try and sort of rejigger some of the assumptions about costs, benefits, and really ways to monetize these savings. You can go to the next slide.
I don't know.
Not moving. Okay.
Because it's showing the next one on mine. There we go.
Okay, so those of us in this world are well aware of this split incentive that the developer pays for the green features, but sometimes, often, the benefits flow to the residents, so that the tenant would get a lower utility bill for electricity or gas. They're the ones benefiting from the health benefits from air filtration and avoiding off-gassing materials. And just on the energy portion, which is usually what we talk about in terms of monetizing the opportunity in affordable housing that is unique, this is getting green in the pro forma, is to understand that the way that the rent is set in income restricted housing is based on an assumption about utility costs. So first you go through these steps of figuring out area median income, the percentage of area median income that's being targeted, if it's 60% or 50%, figuring out what 30% of that is as the housing burden, which would be over here on the left. Sort of a normal approach would say, well, they could afford $1,000 a month. And then there would be a standard utility allowance that would say, we're assuming that utilities are $150 a month. So the rent that would be paid to the owner would be $850. So in that standard schedule, it doesn't account for the energy efficiency, or if there's on-site renewable that's sort of flowing back to the tenants. The image over the bar over to the right is accounting for that and saying, well, if the utility allowance can be reduced to $120, and maybe we give a $5 cushion to the tenants, we could raise the rent by $25 per month. And this sounds like not a lot of money, but across, say, 100 units every month, over the course of several years, that small increase in the rent would be enough to pay back, a couple $100,000 additional debt. And that could then give you, say, $4,000 to $5,000 per unit to invest in these energy efficiency features and really bridge this gap between the operation savings and the need for additional capital dollars. And again, this is unique in income restricted affordable housing, and again, provides a way to have the green strategies and green operations measures reflected in the finances. Next slide.
So once it's successfully financed and built, it's time to operate it. And that is thinking, if we put in energy efficient systems, how do we make sure they actually get run so they operate efficiently? How do we make sure that choices for healthy products and materials are maintained over time? And how do we get residents and staff engaged so that they understand what the building is, how it functions, how they need to live and work in it? And there's really three elements to thinking about green operations. The first, of course, is to keep new projects green and to make sure that the staff training to run the building, resident orientation are part of the transition process from construction to new to operations. But it's equally important to think about the opportunities in existing buildings, which is so much more of the housing stock. New construction is great, but in a decade, we only replace about 10% of the total housing stock. And that means the other 90% is still there needing help. And so there are many low-hanging fruit opportunities to make projects much greener, and that means more energy efficient, much healthier through operations and management. And then anytime an owner owns more than one building, they have an asset management function where they're looking at a portfolio of buildings and thinking about the long-term life cycles, the refinancing cycles, property management services, and all the other elements of having an asset that will continue to be viable over a long period of time. And just we put some checklists for how to think about implementing all of that in the book. and thinking about just the minimums for existing buildings that you would want to tackle to make it much better. The first is to track what's going on with your energy and your water. We all know the expression, you can't evaluate what you don't measure. You can't monitor what you don't measure. And so you have no hope of changing your energy and water consumption in a property if you aren't tracking it. And then water conservation is very low cost to do and very high return. A simple example, in most places with the cost of water, if you change the standard lavatory faucet aerator is at 2.5 gallons per minute of water flow. If you change that out to a 2 gallon per minute or a 1.75 or even a 1 gallon, it's a matter of weeks for that investment to pay off. And even toilets, which are more expensive to install, will pay off in a relatively short amount of time. In terms of healthy housing, really important to implement an integrated pest management approach to pest management, which really focuses on prevention and then using the lowest toxicity approaches possible to deal with any pests that do make an appearance. And of course, transitioning to greener cleaning products and making sure that choices like low VOC paints and caulks and sealants are used and continue to be used over time, getting rid of carpet if that's possible, it's not on the list, going smoke-free, and then making sure that there's consistent messaging and engagement with residents so that they understand how to have greener, healthier lifestyles within the building themselves. Walker, back to you, I think.
Yes, thank you. So chapter 6 is where we sort of ask ourselves this question, where are we going? And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, what really changed, Walker, between the book of 10 years ago and in this revised and fully updated version? And I said, well, what changed is that 10, 12 years ago we were really trying to just prove the concept, and a lot of the first version was saying, look, people have done this, it's possible, we can bring together green and affordable housing. This go around, it was really saying, let's share everything we've learned about how to do this right, how to do this, effectively, streamlined integration of best practices. And I think we've done that in chapters sort of 1 through 5. And then chapter 6 asks this question, what's next? So Kim, I thought we would share this. I'll do the first climate one, and maybe you can talk about health. So there is clearly a advanced discussion about climate, and over the past 12 years, I definitely have seen the narrative shift from sort of slowing climate change, stemming climate change, to the need to adapt, to become resilient, to accept that the climate is changing, and then thinking about what we need to do to build resilience into our buildings, whether that is, thinking about sea level rise or, extreme storm events, high heat, increased wind, poor air quality because of wildfires. And in that context, seeing, the buildings as part of a sort of larger resilience network, but also just the buildings themselves as sort of contributing to this overall effort to move away from carbon-based fuels. So just the past few years, lots of discussion about electrification so that we can power the buildings with increasingly cleaner electricity, and then a concurrent discussion about building materials and the carbon intensity of the building materials, and trying to look at alternatives to concrete, steel, lower carbon options for glass. And even within Ramey Associates, we have a couple of people who are very excited about mass timber buildings and mass timber high-rise buildings as an alternative from the concrete and steel structures. So that's one trend that is certainly out there.
And then health and housing, this is a connection that's been growing for a while. Certainly the understanding of ventilation, I think, is much better than it was. The understanding about environmental tobacco smoke exposures and trying to reduce that in buildings. But COVID-19 has just completely upended our understanding about health and housing, and especially in affordable housing. One issue that's really been on my mind is that affordable housing is housing essential workers. And so we need to have deep conversation with each other and ourselves and our community about what does that mean? How do we create homes that are a safe haven for people who are out being exposed to things like the pandemic? And how can we make it safe for them to come home? And how can it be safe for them to live in a community with other people as well? And so I think that's a conversation that's just beginning, but we will see it grow. And then questions about even more ways to connect housing and health through concepts like active design, and thinking about better connections between health care delivery within communities rather than at health centers. Those are all some of the concepts that housing and health connections are surfacing.
The next trend was really looking at green beyond the building. I touched on resilience, and on a number of the projects I'm involved in, this community space, which is common in affordable housing developments, being seen as not just a place for after school programs and parties and events, but as a place of sort of shelter, convening, both for the residents and potentially the neighborhood, if it's designed correctly, where there is solar, battery storage, and thinking about how to set it up so that that could be a space, a safe space where people could get basic services for 48, 72 hours, if there's a major storm event or other kind of disruptive event. And, surprising things come up once you get into it. Yes, we want to charge our cell phones and we want, light, temperature control, but people need to have medicine refrigerated. People that are on sort of oxygen and need the oxygen equipment to be plugged in. And so, you find how dependent we are on electricity just from so many things in our daily life, and having a place in, close by in neighborhoods where that can happen just enables the housing to sort of its value to the community to be further augmented. Let's go.
And last but not certainly least, the issues of how affordable housing fits in the conversations around social equity, racial equity, and social cohesion really are coming to the front as well. And while social equity as equity in sustainability, equity in housing definitely have been in the conversation, the year we've had has really brought all of those issues even more into the forefront. And in terms of social cohesion, this is something that affordable housing providers have generally done, though not necessarily called it that. But we all recognize that if we know our neighbors and we understand the network of resources that we have within a community, we're stronger and better able to withstand both shocks and stressors from things like climate events and the pandemic that we've had. And so we think that we'll see affordable housing providers and funders thinking more systematically and programmatically about how to really build and sustain social cohesion and social equity within the context of their housing.
Mm-hmm. And I just add a little bit on the social equity. We're seeing it reflected in the rating systems. There's a very strong awareness of social equity in the 2020 Enterprise Community Partners Green Communities criteria. In the Lead for Cities and Communities rating system that I'm involved with quite a bit, we've had lots of discussions about the quality of life category, and if quality of life was not sort of going deep enough on these topics, and if we should rebrand it, retitle it Equity and Empowerment, and then have done a quite extensive run through of that section of Lead for Cities and Communities to augment what's included in the various criteria. And then, here in California, a source of funding. A newer one is the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program. That's funded through the cap and trade program, but when cap and trade was set up, there is an equity environmental justice component that requires that a certain amount of the funds do go towards disadvantaged communities. And so what that's doing is helping fund affordable housing close to transit, or funding transportation mobility related improvements in housing that needs to be better connected to transit. Being quite conscious of sort of equity and climate related activities, but again, ways to kind of anchor these projects more strongly in their communities and have them be even stronger community assets. So I think it's going to be exciting to see these trends evolve and see the degree that they find their way into sort of the formal rating systems, as well as just fundamental parts of best practice in the years ahead.
And we hope that through our book, the practitioners are really sturdy with their fundamentals, so that they're able to really lean into all of these challenges and trends in the coming years.
Yes,
so to kind of wrap up. Walker.
Yes, collaboration. So we got to write this book together, which was a study in collaboration, working across the continent, me in LA and Kim in Boston, and having related but different areas of expertise. It certainly made the book better, and I think I certainly learned a lot, both about green affordable housing, but also how to be a good collaborator, how to contribute, how to take constructive criticism, and I think doing sustainability requires this kind of spirit, skills, behavior, and trust. Built up over time to kind of transcend some of these things that we may sort of perceive as barriers, but that we do need to push through. Kim, any final thoughts on this before we go to the Q&A?
No, just very glad to have had this time to share the book with you. Very excited that so many people were here today, and Walker and I are both very willing and available to help with trainings or program review. If you're trying to incorporate greener strategies and things, we'd love to talk with you about how we can help. But with that, I think we've got Q&A, and just one last reminder of where you can buy the book for 30% off if you buy today. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Great. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Walker. And thanks to everybody who has sent questions in already. We're going to be going through them. And thanks to everybody who kind of bore with us a little bit at the beginning. We had some technical difficulties. So we actually did have a couple of polls that we wanted to put forward to the audience here. And so I think since we are kind of transitioning the Q&A, maybe we want to go ahead and do that before we get into the questions. And I think, Walker, you've muted yourself, so just make sure you're unmuted there.
Thank you.
So, John, do you want the poll? We have a couple polls here for folks to respond to, just to give a sense of who's in the audience today, and that everybody in the audience can see that. So, the first question is, where do you live and work? We have 5 options to respond to. If you are having trouble responding to that, you may need to exit from full screen mode, and we'll just leave this up for a few seconds give people a chance to respond. And we'll show the responses to the second question. We are seeing folks respond to it, and thank you for participating today. And you can continue in the audience if you want to submit questions to the questions tab. That's how we'll go ahead and ask the panelists. And we'll give this a couple more seconds, as I see about 60% of our audience has responded to this. Question we often ask, and sometimes folks like to see this. So 36% are in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. 26% of the audience is in the South. So obviously, percent in the West, 13% in the Midwest, and 4% today are international. So our second poll question, John. We'll pull that up here. So which policy priority do you think is most lacking in the terms of affordable housing here. Supply, stability, or subsidy? Give everybody a chance here. And while folks are responding to that, we have received several requests to get the PowerPoint slide deck. So if you all would be interested in sharing that, we could post that on our webinar archives page.
Yeah, sure.
Here, absolutely. So what will happen is we are recording today. We'll be posting that as well. We'll be sending out an email to all the participants today with a link to that, and then the same site will be where the PowerPoint slides will be available if you are interested in that. So again, we'll give everybody a couple more seconds to respond here. And I can see the responses coming in. There's a good split to these categories. And I think John will close it here. So the response, oops, I didn't see that coming up, John. Did we lose our responses for some reason? Anyway, it relaunched for some reason. It looked in the original, and I think it looks like folks are still voting on this. Supply was the most common response in the first go round on this, with subsidy and stability below that, but it's now relaunched, so we'll just leave it here for another second or two. Thanks to those who are voting twice. I'm not sure what happened with our poll. Looks like John may have had some technical difficulties. So in this case, 52% supply, 31% subsidy, and 17% said stability. Okay. So with that, we will, I'm trying to get this off the screen here. Our technology person is having some trouble being connected today, so I think that's what's happened here. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and go into the questions for you, and appreciate all of them that have come in. We're going to go till about 2:30 Eastern, maybe a couple minutes more, if Kim and Walker have a little extra time, given the volume of the questions that have come in. Since John has left, I have to toggle between a couple different screens to pull all this up and run the board as well.
You're doing a great job. We appreciate it.
Right, Jay. It's a little complicated on this end. Okay, so the first question, I guess, will be from Nancy Ferber, who's asking, how do you address promoting green affordable housing in smaller and rural communities? This research sounds very urban focused, but how can it be scaled down to smaller communities?
Well, Kim, you had a couple of the more rural case studies.
Yeah, so what I think it's easy to think that green is just for cities, but in fact, people find ways to do it in rural communities. And one of the cases in our book is an organization called RUPCO. They're based in Kingston, New York, which is in the Hudson Valley. And Kingston itself is a small city surrounded by a bunch of small towns. And they kind of took the stubborn Dutchman approach of just deciding they wanted to do it and figuring out how to make it so. And they're fortunate that there are good programs in the state of New York through the NYSERDA, the State Energy Research and Development Authority, and good funding to make sure that the resources for affordable housing are distributed into rural communities as well as urban communities. So, I don't think there's a big difference between a well-insulated envelope in a small town and a well-insulated envelope in a big city. So a lot of the fundamentals of green really can be applied anywhere. So it is true that today we showed pictures of more urban places, but we think that green is scalable and doable anywhere if people decide it's what they want to accomplish.
Okay. Next question is, I want to know, do you cover it's actually a question about your book and research. I wanted to know whether you cover the collaboration with local utilities in the case studies, like how best to work with local utilities and policymakers to move a project forward and secure funding. Is that something you've looked at?
Trying to think if we have, I don't think we addressed that specifically in the book. You know, we do talk about, you know, some of these ways to look at financing solar, you know, which is of course direct purchase. And a number of the more recent projects here, at least in California, have been using this net energy metering or virtual net metering as a way to do sort of one larger solar system and then apportion the energy generated or the savings back to each of the individual units. And this is something that's legal in the state of California. It may not be legal across the country. Any other ideas, Kim?
Well, what we didn't research that particular question of how our organizations interfacing with their local utilities and trying to advance policy. And of course, part of the challenge of that is that there's a different solution in every state and with every utility company. So that was really kind of outside of the scope of what we could do. But we did ask for each of the case studies for them to give us their pro formas. So we have a nice breakout of sources and uses. And so every case indicates whether they were able to get resources that are available through their local utilities and whether they found grants and incentives. So, and usually we referenced the utility that they got their funding from, so that if someone is working in a similar market or served by the same utility, they could say, oh, there's the opportunity for programs or funding through this utility for this kind of.
Yeah, and I'd say most of them do have some sort of utility, you know, whether it's an incentive, like a statewide incentive program or a rebate or something that was done in some sort of pilot capacity. Some of the more sort of leading edge projects were definitely an opportunity to, you know, try something out, that they were willing to do that, whether it's, you know, heat pump, hot water heating, some of these on-site generation strategies that I've talked about. You know, modular construction has come up a few times as a way to, you know, sort of explore innovations and potential cost savings. And these are all places where I think we've seen utilities be interested in contributing, again, either through a standardized program or something that may have been kind of tailored for that project.
Okay, thanks, Walker. Next question here is a question from Nancy Ferber, who's saying, without creative financing options, none of this seems very doable. How are project managers, your target audience, supposed to navigate these great suggestions without any new or innovative tools for financing? Low-income housing tax credits have never been just enough to get projects off the ground.
Well, I would say that project managers in affordable housing organizations, whether nonprofit or for-profit, are scavengers when it comes to money, and they find it. And a typical, especially for these larger multifamily projects, the capital stack has 10 or 11 or 12 sources. And so they go out and beat the bushes. And again, it's kind of that attitude. If they decide, they'll always go for the program. So if, for example, in New York, if NYSERDA is offering, they have standard rebates for standard levels of energy efficiency, but then they have special programs for innovation. And so the go-getters will go get that money and put it into their projects. So I have not seen, it seems like there's no money, but in fact there's money. And most groups, if they decide to go for it, figure out how to make the numbers work to achieve their goals for their projects.
You know, we are also sort of falling into the pattern of assuming that it's going to cost a lot more money to do green. And, you know, back to the question on rural, like there's just fundamental things that, I mean, my argument is always that, you know, it just takes sort of ambition, thoroughness, good practice. Like there's no reason why any home should be built to be leaky with the insulation smushed in the wall so it doesn't work right. Like that's just not good follow through and not quality construction. And that's a huge benefit just to a well sealed, well insulated buildings. These faucet aerators that Kim talked about, or the toilets, like these are not high cost items. They may be just a different version of the same thing. So the difference between the 1.6 gallon toilet and the 1.0 gallon toilet might be $50, and that's going to save a lot of water over the course of the project. So I think to be careful to not fall into sort of thinking we always have to be aspirational and targeting LEED Platinum or living building for the green measures to be valuable. A lot of the basics are the ones that derive the greatest benefit and don't cost a lot of additional money. I will just onto this, like, the LIHTC funding is never enough, and that's why there are these capital stacks. It can be a little glib and say, look, these project managers are good at filling out funding applications, which is true, and one more isn't so much of a headache for them. I think the thing that we have to be conscious of as sort of practitioners is to understand how that energy, or water or stormwater, or electric vehicle charging or solar money, may influence that financing stack. And so like our relatively small amount of money, if it upsets the apple cart on everything else, is not gonna work. So, we have to think of aligning with the criteria with the fundamental pieces of financing that they need to have in that financial agreement. Otherwise, it'll just be a fly in the ointment, and they won't want to pursue it.
And another interesting thing, so Walker's makes a good point that often green doesn't cost as much as we think it will. I think there were some early assumptions when green really got off the ground that it was 10 or 20% more expensive, and the evidence is just not there. It can be a little more expensive, but it's much more in the 2 to 3 to 5% range if there is an increase. And then the flip side of it is more and more, and you remember the map with the QAP requirements that Walker showed in the cost section, more and more you have to do some amount of green in order to get any funding at all. So that is also a way that we're ensuring that projects are doing at least green basics, because they're not going to be able to be built if they don't accomplish that.
Yeah. Let's take some more questions.
Great. Okay. Next question here is, do you see applicability of your research extending to the development of infill and single-family residential housing, for instance, to properties within a land bank or other smaller scale initiatives that don't feature multifamily housing developments?
Well, I think we had two good cases for that in the book. One is in Grand Rapids, the Habitat for Humanity affiliate does every single home that they build to LEED certification, typically the gold level. And they were part of one of their homes that we featured as a case as part of a big infill LEED for neighborhood development complex on the southwest side of Grand Rapids. And they applied all these principles to the master plan and the mixed use developments and the single family and townhouse style homes that they built. So, and then another project is in Santa Fe, where they built a mix of single family homes and some condominiums, some small condominium buildings in an area of town that really hadn't seen a lot of investment in many, many decades. And they, rebuilt at a scale that matched what was around in the community, but the mix of both single family and small scale multifamily, just condo buildings with 10 units each.
And then I think Kim talked about green operations and maintenance. We don't have a separate chapter on acquisition rehab, but there's certainly a lot of discussion about preservation of existing affordable housing units, whether that's single family or smaller multifamily. It's certainly a big topic here in Southern California, is not losing housing and understanding that, a lot of the affordable housing stock is in the, like 1 to 4 unit building, maybe 8 unit building. and then, certainly all of those best practices can apply as they relate. So, and it's going to depend on the scope of the project, but certainly you can change out plumbing fixtures, you can change out appliances, and then it's just sort of how deep you're going to go if you can afford to change out the heating and cooling system or windows, or if the walls are going to open up to put in insulation. But I think you just adjust the scale of the green ambition to the scope of the project. And then on this urban infill, I too have worked on a number of Habitat for Humanity projects where it's been, a tiny, 8-unit subdivision in an existing part of, Fresno, for example, or Oakland. And, we're able to integrate the green strategies. So it's kind of like you want to look at the full spectrum and align what your project is, and pick the ones that make sense and that you can afford. And and just again doing the fundamentals is fine. Like you don't have to be getting LEED Gold certified or whatever to feel good about your green measures. And we don't show that diagram, Kim, but like we have this one where we're like, where are the direct benefits? We're like saving energy, saving water, improving health, reducing operating costs. And then you can kind of go out to these other tiers of recycled content and stormwater management and climate action. But you want to get into that sort of nucleus of strategies where you can really draw the lines of benefit directly to the residents or to the owners of the properties.
Thanks, Walker. Okay, next question here is from Bill Pugh, who says, locations near good transit can be expensive. What strategies are there to overcome that challenge, and what cities and regions are doing a good job putting affordable housing near transit?
Well, that might be a better question to push out to our audience of planners and practitioners and see what kind of solutions they're coming up with. One simple equation is that land is expensive near transit, but then if you increase the density, your land cost per unit remains reasonable, right? So when you're buying in higher cost land areas, policies and zoning that allow for higher density or that require affordable units in order to allow building in that area, those are two tools I'm familiar with as ways that try to get the per unit land cost to a reasonable level in high land cost areas.
Yeah, and there's a, what is it, transportation-oriented affordable housing, TOA fund in the Bay Area. One was set up in Denver as they were expanding their light rail system. There's this Genesis fund in Southern California. I think the challenge with housing next to transit is getting ahead of the developers. So, when I started in my planning career, I remember doing some research about whether there was any evidence that building transit would actually have an impact on property values, because it was unclear. I think now we're seeing that there's lots of evidence that when there's a transit investment, it's seen as valuable and the land price goes up. So the trick, I think, and this is on the acquisition rehab of the existing affordable, is to be able to have the funds together and nimble enough to be able to secure the properties before the private sector swoops in and captures them. I think some of these programs, affordable housing, sustainable communities here in California, helps with that to some degree, because it really acknowledges the climate benefit of building particularly affordable housing next to transit. Because you build just any old housing, market rate housing next to transit, you don't have much assurance that the residents will actually use the transit and generate the VMT benefits. But it's pretty clear correlation between lower income residents and transit use, and therefore VMT reduction and climate benefits. So I think maybe coming at it from the climate angle, may open up some new opportunities.
Thank you. Next question is from Roger Walden, who's asking, how do you suggest approaching the politics that come into play regarding energy usage and affordable housing?
I wonder what those politics are.
Yeah.
I guess I'm unclear on the question.
Roger, clarify your question. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
If you're still on the call.
Yeah, so if you want to add a clarification, we'll go back to that question. Okay, next question then is, Does the book explore innovative affordable housing social arrangements such as eco-village communities building affordable housing on community land trusts or cooperatives?
Not so much. We've kind of
No.
focused on the green attribute, not so much these other development models, which are super interesting from a sustainability standpoint.
A lot of those, well, land trusts and co-ops, they come and go in terms of policy fashion. And I would say certainly in the Boston area, Massachusetts, there's very little interest in land trusts and in co-ops from the funders and the policymakers. And so therefore, even if there are sponsors who might be interested in those approaches, the tools to do it just are not available. So I'm sure there may be other places around the country where there are more opportunities through policy and funding, but in Massachusetts, really not easy. And then co-housing takes very high intensity, small d democracy to think about, to plan, to design, to build, to manage. And so it's a great way to think about living together, but a really hard model for typical affordable housing development organizations to try to execute on.
Okay. Next question here is, given competing government budget priorities, funding for subsidies is always short. In some markets, mixed income housing requirements have generated affordable housing that can more easily cover green costs. How do you feel about this approach?
Well, I live in Boston, where any developer is required to, in inclusionary zoning, to make at least 13% of the units affordable. And without any subsidy, they have to cross-subsidize, and that's rental or condo. And there's a way for them to buy out of that requirement, but then pay hundreds of thousands of dollars per bought out unit into an affordable housing fund. So I'm in favor of those kind of techniques. And they work well here. And what we've done in Massachusetts, in Boston over the last few years is to differentiate the percentage so that folks who are building downtown in the high cost, high value land areas have to nudge that number closer to 20%. And people building housing out in the further out neighborhoods where doing development is harder and at a smaller scale, then the percentage isn't quite as high for them. Trying to get the juice where you have the best opportunity in the highest cost development areas and the highest price development areas, and be a little more flexible, but still insist on some level of affordability no matter where you're building in the city.
I think we've seen some funding, again, in these, low-income housing tax credit regulations where, the green measures are not seen as extra and they can be folded into your basis for your project, which is how what's used to calculate your tax credit allocation, or even at least in the California one that, there's the ability to, they call it a basis boost, but it's moving your basis limit line, but it does the same thing, which is to say there are certain green features that we acknowledge, provide a clear and direct stream of benefits that needs to be acknowledged, and these are good investments. And then I think this is just good practice regardless, is to say, what's this do? Is the tail wagging the dog? We want to save money, we want to save energy and water and improve health. It's not, I'm always arguing that affordable housing, publicly subsidized affordable housing, is not the place to be doing a lot of experimentation on the most cutting edge practices. Like, we need stuff to work. We need it to work for a long time. We don't want to pass on a unrealistic maintenance burden or to, advocate for some tricky piece of technology that only one person can, service, and, they live, 2 hours away. So I think if we can kind of hone in on that, again, those core benefits, and then figure out, how to provide some additional funding for those types of things, that's good. On Kim's point, I certainly see this instance where there'll be, either an inclusionary ordinance where you have to do the housing or pay an in lieu fee, or there'll be this sort of list of public benefits. And in this case, you can end up with sort of playing housing off of green, where it'll be like, well, either you do affordable housing or you do LEED certification. And you're like, well, what if we do both? And they're like, well, you got to pick one from the list. And so, ideally, we're looking for these moments of synergy and not sort of, creating new silos.
Thank you. Okay, we did hear back from Roger.
Good.
Excuse me, who clarified politics. Communities with doubters about climate change issues, national trends of some politicians to emphasize the use of fossil fuels, and the recent pushbacks regarding affordable housing initiatives in suburbs.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now I understand some of these politics. Yeah. So I would, there's a little bit of sort of tailoring the message to the audience. So, in some places you might say, well, this is a, climate action strategy, or this is a climate resilience strategy. I think in another place you might say, this is a way to lower the bills of low-income residents so that they're more able to get, on their feet and stabilize our economic situation and, be back as productive members of society, not put the big sort of philosophical or political layer on top of it. That's what's, core part of this is just, efficient use of resources and energy. And if that lowers the bills, then that, augments the already subsidized housing, creates more income stability. The challenge with sort of the lack of desire for affordable housing in the suburbs, the NIMBYism, an ongoing issue. The best approach that I've been able to see is you just show people some of the more recent developments, and they see like the quality of the design, the quality of maintenance. In many cases, these are the best buildings on the block or in multiple blocks. And I think none of the proof is in the pudding, and it's it's as much about just doing a tour as about trying to come up with some smart things to say. We've got so many examples of good affordable housing and good green affordable housing that I think people might actually welcome in their neighborhood, over some of the state of the market rate stuff.
What we're finding in Massachusetts is that in a lot of communities, a majority of people would like to have zoning that is encouraging multifamily and affordable, but our town meeting approach and the requirements in the state law are that a 2/3 majority of voters need to approve those kind of changes in the zoning code. And it's turned out that you can get 55 or 57%, but it's hard to get to 67%. So we actually have a law in the legislature right now that's trying to change that to 50% as the standard for making these kind of zoning changes, which would help a lot to change the rules and encourage a broader range of development in suburban communities.
Okay, thank you. So I know we're a little bit over, but maybe we can ask a couple more questions before we wrap, since we've gotten so many today. And thanks to everybody for submitting them. We never quite have enough to cover them all. I guess here's the question: does the book cover different materials and design techniques for different types of environments? For example, desert, coastal, suburban, fire risk areas, and so on.
A little, but not
a little.
lot.
A little. I think the case studies really highlight this, and this was very on purpose, that we look for different typologies for the case studies, but also different climate zones. And and that's probably if you think it through, Kim, like the climate zones may be one of the biggest distinguishing factors. Is it hot and dry, cold and wet? And that sort of influences a lot of your building envelope ideas, how much water you have to maintain or prevent from getting in your building or deal with your stormwater. And it does have an influence on your energy systems. Been multiple times, and I'll bring up something and then Kim will go in a different direction. I'll be like, right, they're in Boston. They have it's below freezing for multiple days. It leads to a different systems approach. So it's probably the envelope in the building systems where we're going to see the most variation. I think once we get inside.
And what we tried to do in the book was to point out that needs to be considered, and to give a couple of examples of how it can be different in different climate zones, thinking through some of these things. But our book is not a design handbook that goes climate zone by climate zone. The folks at Building Science Corporation have done an excellent job of producing a whole set, 6 different handbooks to do that. So when it's time for that level of detail, other resources are better.
Yeah, I mean, the intent's to empower this generalist, the project manager, and then I think other people who care about housing and care about green to, to kind of understand the fundamental arguments and then approaches to do this. I think to guide and kind of nudge your design team, to say, oh, we thought about this, have we thought about that, just so people don't kind of default to what was done before, which is, I think we all do this. And be like, oh, well, this is what we designed last time for our mechanical system. Nobody asked me to do it differently. And then if you ask, they're like, sure, we could put in an inline filter and filter the air before it comes in. Nobody asked me. Or we could look at an alternate to the hot water system, or a different kind of approach to the building envelope. So sometimes it's a lot about just sort of empowering the person to ask the right question and express the kind of concern and ambition. That's really what this book is there to do. We talked about this, that we're not writing the be all and end all of green building. Like, there's other people who have written those books. For the designers, we're trying to write something for the project managers, and arguably the sort of people working in housing finance agencies are really advocates to bring green and housing together.
Thank you. I guess we'll make this our last question. The term affordable housing tends to cause immediate consternation to local officials being asked to approve these new housing initiatives. How do others avert or minimize the negative image that this type of development triggers?
Well, I think they can, like I said, they can show people past examples of, say, this is what we're really talking about. There's a misconception that it's, going to be a tenant base where people don't have jobs, they're hanging out all day long. People quickly associate it with the honestly sad state of public housing in this country, because at a federal level there hasn't been the investment that's been needed for 40 or 50 years. But to be able, not all affordable housing, but a lot of what's built, like, you need a job to be able to afford the subsidized rents. So these are people aren't making a lot of money, but they're working. And then typically the developers are people who want to do more development, so they want their projects to be well run, well maintained. I can't remember this example, but it was just a couple of weeks ago where it may have been a podcast I listened to, but there was a story of not wanting the housing, and then the housing was built, and then the community said, could we get some more affordable housing, because it's so much better than the market rate stuff that's being built. But I don't have any tricky euphemistic strategy to call it like compassionate housing, or respect all humans in your neighborhood housing. It is affordable, and it's meant to be affordable to people who are need some assistance, but it doesn't mean that they're not contributing members of society, and in that there shouldn't be this sort of compassion. Maybe we should change it to compassionate housing that cares. I don't know what you think.
Well, no, I agree with what you said, Walker. I think there has been some effort to call affordable housing workforce housing, to get at this issue that it's housing. And like I said at the beginning of our time together, it turns out it's housing for essential workers, right? And so sometimes that's another way of talking about it. Now, workforce housing has become its own policy thing at sometimes a slightly higher income level than the strict limits on affordable housing at 60% of AMI, which is the case for most of the tax credit developments.
Yeah, workforce will be like 80 to 1.
A language and policy question. Sometimes, sometimes you'll hear people calling it workforce housing. There is also the YIMBY movement. I don't know how many people have come across that, but that's the yes in my backyard, where there are folks saying, no, this is the kind of housing we need. And as back to one of the premises of smart growth is that we need a range of housing types to meet the housing needs of a range of household types. And so just continuing to make the case, if we want to have housing for, the folks who are working in our stores and the entry-level teachers, this is the kind of housing we need to build, so there's a place for them in our community.
That's a great point. It kind of brings us full circle back to some of the discussion about, COVID and the sort of the relationship between sort of housing investment and sort of, COVID transmission and deaths. And I think, the experience of COVID has really revealed sort of, who enables a lot of our lives to operate. I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home, but, I am ordering things online that are delivered to my door. And, I am making my, every few days trip to the grocery store that I expect to be stocked. And so I think if we can humanize, talk about the people that will live in the housing and the role that they play, in the communities, it turns it away from being a building with perceived negative attributes to, again, sort of thinking about who's going to live there and the value that they provide. It is essential workers, and it's the people that have sort of, enabled us to kind of keep going in this moment of crisis. So, we kind of come back to equity and, everybody sort of having a right to the community, and how we are really sort of all reliant on each other.
I think that's a good place to stop today, and a good summary, but I'll give each of you, I guess, a couple seconds if you have any additional takeaways or closing thoughts for us today.
Just really glad to be able to talk with a group of folks who are interested in smart growth and planning, and how affordable housing and green affordable housing fits into larger goals about sustainable, healthy, vibrant communities.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. And it was great to have enough time to stretch out a little bit and get into some more of the specifics and very thoughtful questions. So really appreciate this. And, we need to do this. It's the holidays soon. If you are looking for a great gift for someone, I can recommend this book, Greening Affordable Housing. It may sound sort of technically dense, but certainly there's, chapter 1, chapter 6, the intros, the forward, all relevant stuff for anybody who's interested in how to make a more sustainable, caring, compassionate, community.
And the cases are great.
And the cases are really great. Yeah, they're little novellas in themselves.
Great. Well, thank you both today, and thanks for taking a little bit extra time for the questions. We will share the questions with the panelists today so that they can see them, and you will have the opportunity to reach out to them as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude our webinar today, Blueprint for Green Affordable Housing. I'd like to offer a great big thank you to Kim Vermeer and Walker Wells for a great presentation, to everyone who attended, and to John Coleman, our communications and technology guru, who helps to make this all happen. The complete recording of today's webinar will be posted on smartgrowth.org. Also, for those who have requested one, all attendees will receive an email that will contain a link to a personalized certificate of participation. Please look for this follow-up email. When you exit from today's webinar, you'll be asked to participate in a short evaluation. Please take a few moments to provide feedback so that we can continue to improve the webinar experience for you. And finally, keep an eye out on smartgrowth.org and your email inbox for details on other future webinars. Have a great day.